On July 1st, 2030, Canada delivered a seismic blow to Russia's war machine while providing a vital lifeline to Ukraine, striking President Vladimir Putin and his Kremlin elite where it hurts most, their wallets, by transferring $1.7 billion, 2.3 billion Canadian dollars, to Ukraine, sourced entirely from the profits of frozen Russian assets. Canada has transformed Russia's own wealth into a weapon that fuels Ukraine's resistance. This audacious move, rooted in the global response to Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, marks a turning point in the economic warfare against Putin's regime. As a leader in the G7's Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration (ERA) loans initiative, Canada is redirecting Russia's immobilized funds to bolster Ukraine's defense, reconstruction, and humanitarian efforts. The message is unmistakable. Russia's aggression will be its undoing, as it seizes wealth and powers the very nation it seeks to crush. This financial masterstroke not only strengthens Ukraine, but also exposes the fragility of Putin's war-driven economy, teetering on the edge of collapse. The genesis of sanctions, a global response to Russia's invasion. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, the international community responded with unprecedented unity. Western nations, led by the United States, Canada, the European Union, and the United Kingdom, alongside allies like Japan and Australia, imposed sweeping sanctions to cripple Russia's economy and pressure Putin to end the war. A cornerstone of these measures was the freezing of Russian assets, targeting the financial lifelines of the Kremlin, its oligarchs, and state-owned entities. Bank accounts, foreign currency reserves, luxury yachts, private jets, real estate holdings, and investments in Western markets were locked down. By the end of 2022, over $300 billion in assets were frozen globally, a figure that has since swelled to an estimated $350 billion, according to Castellum.ai's June 2030 report. These assets included Moscow's central bank reserves, oligarchs' London penthouses, and state-owned company stakes in Western firms. The freezes were surgical, designed to hit Russia's elite hard. A Canadian diplomat involved in the sanctions process, speaking anonymously, revealed, "We targeted Putin's inner circle, oligarchs, ministers, and cronies, who propped up his war. Freezing their wealth was meant to make them feel the pain immediately." Assets range from Roman Abramovich's seized Chelsea FC to sprawling villas in Monaco and superyachts docked in Dubai. These measures aim to destabilize Russia's war effort by cutting off access to funds needed for military operations. Initially, the strategy banked on a short war, hoping the economic squeeze would force Putin to retreat. But as the conflict dragged into its 8th year, with Russia's aggression unrelenting, the conversation shifted to a bolder idea: using these frozen assets to directly aid Ukraine. The ERA initiative, weaponizing Russia's wealth. The G7, comprising Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US, launched the Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration (ERA) loans initiative in June 2024, a groundbreaking program to support Ukraine using Russia's own money. The initiative pledges up to $53 billion in loans to Ukraine, repaid through profits generated by frozen Russian assets, such as interest and dividends from immobilized investments. This mechanism is a financial masterstroke, turning Russia's wealth into a direct weapon against its war effort. For Putin and his oligarchs, it's a double blow. Their assets remain inaccessible, and their profits now arm Ukraine's military, rebuild its infrastructure, and support its people. A Kiev-based economic analyst, Irina Voloshyna, said, "It's poetic justice. Putin's war chest is being raided to fund Ukraine's survival." The ERA initiative faced significant hurdles: legal complexities, navigating international law to repurpose frozen assets, delayed implementation, as did financial logistics, such as determining how to channel profits without violating property rights. Despite these challenges, the G7 has streamlined the process by 2030, and funds are now flowing rapidly. The initiative structure is ingenious. Profits from assets held in Western financial institutions, like Euroclear in Belgium or banks in New York, are pooled into a G7-managed fund, then disbursed as loans to Ukraine. These loans cover critical needs: military equipment, humanitarian aid, and infrastructure repair, while the principal assets remain frozen, ensuring compliance with international law. A G7 official explained, "We're not seizing the assets outright yet. We're using their profits to make Russia pay for its aggression." Canada's pioneering role. Canada has emerged as a trailblazer in the ERA initiative. On June 30th, 2030, Ukraine's Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal confirmed Canada's $1.7 billion contribution, stating, "These funds, secured from frozen Russian assets, make Russia pay for its crimes." Since January, we received $17.6 billion through ERA. I'm grateful to Canada and all partners. We demand full confiscation of Russian assets to compensate victims and rebuild Ukraine. This payment is the first tranche of Canada's $5 billion Canadian dollars commitment, with additional funds expected in 2030 and beyond. The $1.7 billion, equivalent to 2.3 billion Canadian dollars, was drawn from profits on Russian assets frozen in Canadian banks, including central bank reserves and oligarch-owned investments. Canada's Finance Minister, Dominic LeBlanc, emphasized, "This is about justice. Russia caused this war, and its wealth will help Ukraine prevail." Ukraine is deploying these funds strategically. Defense spending is a priority, with the $1.7 billion enabling purchases of advanced FPV drones, Javelin missiles, and air defense systems to counter Russia's numerical advantage. Ukraine's Finance Minister Sergei Marchenko noted, "These funds strengthen our army and stabilize our economy, giving us the tools to resist." Humanitarian aid is equally critical, supporting over 4 million internally displaced Ukrainians, a number likely higher in 2030 due to intensified Russian bombardments. In Lviv, a displaced mother, Alina, shared, "My family lost our home in Mariupol. This money means food, shelter, and a chance to rebuild." Infrastructure repair is another focus, with Russian attacks devastating hospitals, power grids, and water systems. In Kharkiv, hospital director Mykola described the impact. "Our clinic was hit twice. With Canada's funds, we're restoring wards and saving lives." The G7's unified push. The ERA initiative kicked off in January 2030 with a €3 billion payment from the European Commission, part of an €18.1 billion pledge for the year. Vice President Kaja Kallas declared, "Russia started this war, so Russia must pay." These funds support Ukraine's economy, repairs, and defense. The EU followed with €1 billion payments in March, April, May, and June, totaling €5 billion. President Ursula von der Leyen affirmed, "As Ukraine's largest donor, the EU ensures Russia bears the cost of reconstruction. We'll stand by Ukraine's sovereignty for as long as it takes." Japan contributed €3 billion on June 5, 2030, building on its $8.5 billion in aid since 2022. Marchenko praised Japan. "Their support ensures our fiscal sustainability." The U.S. delivered $1 billion in late 2029, part of a $20 billion pledge, while the U.K. transferred £752 million, $1 billion, in March 2030, a third of its £2.26 billion commitment. Chancellor Rachel Reeves said, "Ukraine needs our support to secure peace against Russia's aggression." Collectively, the G7 has provided $18 billion in ERA loans in 2030, all from Russian asset profits. At the NATO summit in The Hague, Secretary General Mark Rutte announced that Europe and Canada will surpass 2024's €50 billion in aid, with €35 billion pledged by mid-2030. "Our support for Ukraine is unwavering," Rutte said. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, speaking at the June 2030 Fair Play Conference, pushed for bolder action. "We must use a full $350 billion in frozen assets, not just profits, to arm Ukraine and rebuild our defense industry." He urged extraordinary decisions to halt Russia's aggression, noting NATO's growing recognition of the threat. Sybiha's call for full asset confiscation reflects Ukraine's push for a seismic shift in strategy, potentially unlocking hundreds of billions to transform the war's outcome. Russia's economic meltdown. While Ukraine gains strength, Russia's economy is collapsing under the weight of its war. Minister Maxim Reshetnikov warned at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, "We're on the brink of recession." Central bank head Elvira Nabiullina noted that Russia's free resources, labor, capital, and the National Wealth Fund, which plummeted from $113 billion in 2022 to $36.4 billion by June 2030, are exhausted. Inflation hit 9.9% in May, with food prices up 12.5% and fruits and vegetables soaring 19.8%. A Moscow grocer, Irina, said, "People can't afford bread. They're angry but scared to speak out." A 2.3% unemployment rate masks a 2 million worker shortage, with business profits down a third and oil and gas profits halved. Russia's labor crisis is acute, with manufacturing, trade, and transportation sectors short 391,000, 347,000, and 219,000 workers, respectively, per the Kiev Independent. Sanctions, 24,311 by 2030, per Castellan.ai, have choked Russia's economy, driving up import costs by 21% for goods from non-sanctioning partners like China and 122% for military supplies, per France's CPI. An anonymous Kremlin insider told Novaya Gazeta Europe, "Putin's trapped. The war is bankrupting us. But he can't stop Russia's military spending at $150 billion in 2030, 6.5% of GDP and 33% of its budget, dwarfs Ukraine's but fuels the crisis." Global firepower highlights Russia's vast arsenal, with 12,000 tanks and 1,500 jets compared to Ukraine's 2,300, but Ukraine's allied support levels the playing field. Russian oligarchs, their wealth frozen and now funding Ukraine, are growing restless. A London-based Russian exile, once a Kremlin financier, said, "The oligarchs are furious. Their yachts and mansions are gone, and Putin's losing their loyalty. The human toll and Ukraine's resilience. Russia's 1 million casualties, including 250,000 deaths and 1,220 daily losses, per Ukraine's data, drain its workforce and morale." A conscript letter from Donetsk. "We're dying for nothing. The war is bleeding us dry." Russian soldiers earn $2,034 monthly, placing them in the top 10% of earners, but the cost, hundreds of thousands of lives and billions in salaries, is unsustainable. In Russia, families like Svetlana's in Novosibirsk struggle. "My husband died in Bakhmut. Now, I can't afford rent with inflation so high." Meanwhile, Ukraine's resilience shines. The $18 billion in ERA loans supports advanced weaponry, like FPV drones that have destroyed $10 billion in Russian assets, per Ukraine's military reports. A drone operator in Zaporizhia, Victor, said, "Their tanks are sitting ducks. Every dollar from Russia's pockets makes our strikes deadlier." Humanitarian aid eases the burden on over 4 million displaced Ukrainians. In Dnipro, a volunteer, Anna, distributing ERA-funded supplies, said, "These funds feed families who lost everything. It's Russia paying for its destruction. Infrastructure, repairs restore power and water to war-torn regions." A Kiev engineer, Natalia, working on a bombed-out substation, said, "This money keeps our lights on. It's Russia paying for what they broke." Ukraine's military innovations, like domestically produced drones and upgraded Soviet-era tanks, stretch these funds further, ensuring every dollar counts. Geopolitical stakes and Putin's dilemma. Putin faces a dire choice: continue the war and risk economic collapse, or retreat and admit failure. The ERA initiative, turning Russia's wealth against it, tightens the noose. With sanctions inflating military costs and oligarchs wavering, domestic unrest grows. A Moscow protester, risking arrest, whispered, "Putin's bankrupted us for this war. We want it to end." Ukraine's NATO-backed momentum, fueled by G7 funds, ensures the war grinds on. A NATO analyst noted, "Russia's running out of money and morale. Ukraine's outlasting them." Putin's summer 2030 offensive in Sumy and Donetsk has stalled, with only minor gains like a lithium deposit, per the Kiev Post. Ukraine's drone strikes and Western-supplied weapons, like javelins and storm shadows, exploit Russia's weaknesses, inflicting heavy losses. The loss of oligarch support is a growing threat. A St. Petersburg businessman, speaking anonymously, said, "The elite backed Putin for profit. Now, their wealth is funding Ukraine and they're turning on him. Domestic pressure is mounting, with small protests in cities like Ekaterinburg suppressed but signaling discontent. A Russian political analyst, Dmitry Orlov, predicted, if Putin can't deliver victories, the oligarchs and public will force a reckoning. Any peace deal will expose Putin's mismanagement, potentially sparking unrest. Meanwhile, Ukraine's strategic gains, bolstered by ERA funds, positioned to outlast Russia's crumbling war machine. The road ahead. Canada's $1.7 billion contribution, par of the G7's $18 billion in ERA loans, is a double victory, strengthening Ukraine while stripping Russia's elite of their wealth. As Ukraine rebuilds, fights, and innovates, Russia's economy falters, its military stumbles, and Putin's grip weakens. The ERA initiative, with potential to tap the full $350 billion in frozen assets, could force Putin to the negotiating table. For now, Ukraine grows stronger with every dollar, turning Russia's aggression into its own salvation. The war's outcome hangs in the balance, but Canada's bold move has tipped the scales toward Ukraine's resilience. What are your thoughts? Can Ukraine's allied support outlast Russia's war machine, or will Putin find a way to endure? Share below and explore our coverage on Ukraine's Crimea strikes or Russia's economic crisis for deeper insights.